This week we review another book from our friends at Avery Hill. Last year I did a brief one-person review on the show of Kit Anderson's Safer Places, a collection of short stories that had somewhat of a through line in it. Her new book is a full-on graphic novel called Second Shift, which has gotten some breathlessly positive reviews from writers who give the impression that they totally understand this book. At Deconstructing Comics, our reviews tend to be more nuanced. What did we think of it? I'm joined by Loyala Marymount University professor Juan Mah y Busch to examine this book, and we're not afraid to say we found it difficult to understand. First, I'd like to thank our patrons for helping to keep the show going. You can pitch in by pledging at least $2 a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo, and this time, for the first time in quite a while, I'm talking with Juan Mah y Busch in the Los Angeles area. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Good evening and good morning.
Yeah, so Juan, for a little while, you were making like one appearance a year on Deconstructing Comics, 2014, 15, and 16, and then I don't know what went off track there, but 9 years later, you're finally back.
Yeah, I mean, part of the answer is, my kids were at a certain age where I sort of took a little bit of a step back in general. Probably COVID had something to do with it too.
Sure.
And then kind of the directions of my work, but yeah, it's good to be back.
So, since it's been so long, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, my name is Juan Mah y Busch. I've been a professor here at Loyala Marymount in Los Angeles for 23 years now. I am in a department of English as well as in a department of ethnic studies, Chicano and Latino studies, and I serve as chair of the department for Chicano Latino studies. Did a lot of work on comics early on and kind of integrated into my classes, and have been working more now with kind of different forms of awareness, knowledge, agency, stuff like that. So some of it actually comes up in this comic.
Okay, good. So as listeners may be aware, we've had kind of a relationship with Avery Hill, the publisher in the UK. They we're on their mailing list and they send us stuff, and it doesn't always make it onto the podcast, but often it does. And so this time they've sent us Kit Anderson's second book, Second Shift. So last year they sent us the first book called Safer Places, which I don't remember why it ended up this way, but I did a brief one-person review of it in episode 807. Which came out shorter than I expected it to. Like, I read this book it was not quite that bad, but it was a small section at the end of the episode. And this book, well, the two books have some things in common, one of which is that the first time I read it, I say, huh? And then the second time, I start to understand it a little better. And I actually read it a third time and picked up a few things that I missed the other two times. But the book still kind of puzzles me, which I think Safer Places I never quite completely figured out either. But I don't, and I find it a little frustrating when I don't know, sometimes subtlety, it's kind of hard for me to pick up, and there's so much, I think, in the book that she doesn't actually say. It's not explicit. It's just kind of, you have to kind of figure it out, kind of intuit what she's trying to get across. There are a lot of places where I said, well, it could be this, but I'm not sure. How'd you feel about it?
It's interesting that you framed it like that. I do feel like where there were times where I kind of wish like there was more. It sort of reminded me, did you ever see that Spanish film, Abre los ojos, Open Your Eyes? They did a remake, Vanilla Skies, with Tom Cruise and
I've heard of it,
Penelope Cruz. Yeah. it kind of had some of that feel to it, where in the end, the person's kind of in this totally different space and everything. The other piece of it here that I felt like is, I agree with your point about kind of subtlety. And there's times where sort of I wanted more. There were also times where I felt like possibly she was almost too direct. And all of a sudden I kind of was like, at moments where like it started pulling my thinking towards degrees of curiosity for the main character. And then all of a sudden it says, well, the Heck character says, you lack curiosity. And I was like, okay, well, now that's sort of out of the bag. So it was interesting because on the one hand, it felt too maybe subtlety in places, and then at other places, maybe too direct.
Yeah, there were a number of places where one of the characters was like starting to say something that I thought would have made things a lot clearer, and then they don't finish the sentence. Like, keep talking. What were you going to say?
Right. Let's hear that. I do think that so maybe where I would push back on you a little bit is clarity might be the wrong thing to look for. And I suspect that that's part of the play in the comic is, that it's unclear and that it's kind of playing with this lack of certainty for the character. And so clarity maybe isn't what it's necessarily reaching for, but at times it feels like give us a little bit more so that we as the reader can hold on to what's happening here. Even if kind of conceptually you don't want perfect clarity, at least give us artistically a little bit more to hold on to so that we can go there with you. And that might have been a little bit of a gap.
Well, and then what I find really annoying is that I read reviews of the book and the reviewer writes as if they completely understood everything in the book perfectly. It's like, what? What are you talking about? And they're implying things that happened in the book. I'm like, what? Really? Did that happen? And so with reviewers, sometimes I feel like they just, whatever they assume is the case is what actually happened. And I've said before, sometimes I talk to creators and I'll say, this reviewer said you did this. And they said, oh, that's a nice idea. I wish I'd thought of it, so.
Yeah. It does feel like a lot of the blurbs and stuff, like they need to say something. So they look for something to say. It doesn't make for a great blurb to say, yeah, I'm not really sure what just happened here. There were a couple times where
puzzling, deconstructing comics.
I was reading a couple blurbs where they talked about, this incredible kind of psychological, tension or I forget, I think psychological thriller one of them referred to or something like that. And I was like, I don't know. Like I kind of enjoyed it more when I was thinking about it in terms of curiosity and indifference and this sort of tension that lied somewhere a little bit more subtly than, psychological thriller, but not sure.
Well, so let's talk about what we understand in this book. It starts out really disorienting because although I realized on the third read that the text page at the beginning kind of got a few things across that I wasn't quite sure of, like some of the jargon that the characters are using. Basically they're on some other planet. These two main characters, Birdie and Heck, who it's mentioned a couple of times vaguely that they're brother and sister. They're on some other planet in this kind of AI controlled living, they call it the station. And the station manifests as these kind of ghostly animals that talk to them, which I thought was kind of interesting because her first book, Her Safer Places, also had ghostly animals in it. That seems to be something she likes. They weren't AI, they were of a different nature, but they were still ghostly animals.
Can I take a step back before the technical opening? Because she starts with this dedication for Alan, and I feel like it's a little bit telling because it says who is always building something better. And I feel like as you get into the story, the building something better is initially this TerraCorp kind of doing some terraforming and trying to create a livable planet elsewhere. But then, of course, the book evolves, and it's about kind of the character finding a better place. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that dedication might kind of split into two ways, but certainly I think it's foreshadowing a bit of what we're going to discover in the story. And then, of course, it opens up like you did the first time I read it. There's that black page that talks about TerraCorp, but then if you have to follow the asterisks, and the
Mm.
asterisk in the bottom circle says, subject to credit allowance. And
Yeah,
so
I'll just
everything sounds.
read the
Go
whole
ahead.
thing here.
Yeah.
Between
Go ahead.
shifts on TerraCorp outposts, TerraCorp has a circle R, registered trademark marked next to it. Between shifts on TerraCorp outposts, all crew members are dropped in to our and dropped in is a term of jargon that they use. Dropped in to our company exclusive dream space, registered trademark. While inside, they can use their stasis time to brush up on employee trainings, enjoy credit earning promotions, and embark on specially tailored dreams. And then there's, the footnote, subject to credit allowance. It's true that the dropout process can be a little unpleasant, but all caps, isn't it all worth it?
Right. And so we already, like, in that opening page again, like you were saying, it sort of sets up some of the jargon, which at first is elusive because you don't really know where it's coming from. It hasn't quite
Mm-hmm.
been explained yet, but you at least have this tension introduced of like, okay, it sounds very dreamy and perfect, but it's subject to credit allowance. And that kind of is the initial tension that we notice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, and we're the first thing we're seeing is this like fox chasing a rabbit, and I still don't completely understand what's going on there. Although much later we see some suggestion that the fox and the rabbit are like fake or stuffed or something.
So they're in that museum. They're in a diorama of the museum as the
Hmm.
comic comes to a close,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems as if there's all these, like, going back to your idea of the subtlety. There's these moments that refer to that in these somewhat quiet ways. Like, for instance, sound is an issue that comes up, and they talk about how well, the dioramas at the museum don't have sound.
Hmm.
And there's a couple times throughout the comic that they mention kind of the absence of sound, or they ask her what kind of
Mm-hmm.
music she would like, that kind of thing. So I think it's going back to the diorama in the museum, but like you're pointing out, okay, so now I know the reference, but I still don't quite understand the significance of it. I don't
Right.
quite know exactly what it means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we find then that Birdie, who's the main character, she is waking up. She is dropping out, waking up from the dream space, and just kind of frazzled from coming out of that experience. And she finds her brother, who's also just dropped out. His name is Heck. The first time I saw that, I thought she was saying, "Oh, heck."
You're right. Right.
But it's his name. And then we also meet this woman called Porter, who is like a different shift. So of the title, second shift is Heck and Birdie, and Porter is apparently the only person on the first ship.
Right.
First
Right.
shift. Although, and looking at the cover of the book again, I started thinking the way second shift is written, maybe it has an extra meaning to it that I'm not grasping. There's something else that it's trying to get across besides just first shift, second shift of a job. But yeah, so, and Porter is talking about how things are not quite going right on the station. And Heck mentions that several times also. Things are kind of falling apart. And Birdie doesn't seem to see that. It doesn't seem like things are malfunctioning to her.
Right.
And that there's a lot of talk about what they call the payloads, which I guess it's explained later they are asteroids and comets that are steered toward a TerraCorp planet in order to deposit their minerals and gases. So, and Heck gets kind of upset when she calls them payloads. He says, just call them asteroids and comets. Call them what they are. So, but sometimes I guess the payloads are going wrong, or they're like crashing into the planet and like almost killing them.
Well, so I think they're meant to crash into the planet. They're not meant to almost kill them. Like, I think that's
Yeah.
the crashing into the planet is how they apparently, release their minerals and stuff. And I don't quite understand how the corporation is, I don't think the reader is meant to understand how the corporation is managing these asteroids and comets. We just sort of let that be believed that can happen.
So what am I overlooking here? What am I forgetting to mention?
Are we going to go? Did you want to go kind of chapter by chapter chronologically, or how did you want to proceed?
Well, we could do that. So let's see. Porter goes back into. She drops in. Things keep happening that I'm not quite sure about the significance of them. So when she says, "To heck, the visuals are important. I mean, Station can only do so much for you in there," and she points to his forehead, and he says, "Get off," which seemed like kind of a strange thing to say. I mean, he apparently doesn't want her to touch him. And that,
what page are you on right now?
That is page 14.
Yeah.
But then, later, I think, isn't it she who's saying, like, "Don't touch my helmet," when they're moving around outside in their sort of space suits.
Yeah. I mean, not to do like spoiler alert in chapter 1 or something, but to the point you were bringing in terms of the shifts, like, again, I feel like you're clearly correct with the them being the second shift that comes. They drop out after Porter, and dropping out. It's kind of awkward jargon, but it makes sense because dropping out is actually coming back into reality, presumably our shared reality, because dropping in is this kind of dreamscape space that they're in to sort of entertain themselves in the in-between moments between the shifts. So they're the second shift. They drop out, which can be unpleasant, as noted. It does seem like, to me, and I don't know if I'm taking it too far, but it seems like at the end, when she starts really kind of asking questions, and there seems to be kind of more turmoil for her, I sort of took that as the secondary second shift, where she's kind of coming to this realization or trying to understand it, and that's kind of that second shift. So whenever I see these moments of like head poking or like touching of the helmet, it seems like we're hey, leave my mind alone, like kind of like this sort of thing, like, don't poke at it, don't push at it. So that was sort of the way I retrospectively, after getting to the end of the comic, was thinking about these moments. But it does seem like a lot of the comic is meant to be, like, the significance of the comic is meant to happen retrospectively, like, oh, and then you kind of like flick back, even like the fox and the rabbit, right? At first, it's sort of like, I'm not sure what's going on. And the fox and the rabbit, in fact, if you look at the artist's webpage, is it's an image of the fox chasing the rabbit is what's up in the blurb for the book and stuff. But it's only at the end that it's like, oh, now I see what the reference is. So it almost feels like I'm reading the book retrospectively or something.
Right. Well, yeah, like I said, you have to read it more than once to get anything out of it, I think. So, yeah, I found it interesting that they have the stasis dropping in, but then they also, like, do regular sleep. There's a scene where they're going to bed, and like, okay, so how long is this shift?
Right. That is a question to ask. Like, and would they even know it if, part of it is going to be like, do they even know how long a shift is? Because presumably when they drop in, they could still be pretending they're in a shift, or, it is what they want it to be. It's one of the quotes in there. Like,
yeah. Well, the animals keep saying, like, I'm whatever you want me to be.
Right.
Yeah. And we see that they can kind of, for entertainment, like, have the AI create different kind of worlds, and we see them in kind of a medieval world. She's wearing a suit of armor. She can turn herself into smoke to get through a barred gate. So that's kind of interesting. And there's this cool kind of skeleton in a frayed cape that comes and talks to them in a spooky voice with a dripping word balloon. I liked the art on that. It was really cool.
And those moments also kind of reveal, like, ultimately, if this is a comic book about what we know and what we don't know, or kind of awareness and lack of awareness, there's all these little moments in the dialogue where a character doesn't quite realize something. So I agree with some of the art you're describing. Those are kind of fun moments when Birdie goes through those bars and Heck says, "Oh, wow, can we just do that?"
Yeah.
Right? And so there's these moments where they're kind of learning. There's other moments where we notice that the AI is not perfect. And so like it kind of goes beyond human social etiquette and says, "Oh, I said too much," or, "Oh, I went too far with that, didn't I?" And it has to regroup and gather itself. And so there's these moments of slippage that mark this kind of like cracks in that awareness, or like if it's supposed to be this perfect dropping in, it's not that perfect. Like there's these cracks in it. So.
I also thought it was kind of humorous that later on, when they try to do the medieval fantasy thing again, and like Heck kind of wanders off, and she's like, all right, or just wants to take a moment or something, and the skeleton like breaks characters that, okay, sure, whatever you want to do.
Well, I mean, to me, that's the foreshadowing of the kind of like whatever you want. Like it's kind of like, yeah. So this death character, which is the ultimate, death is kind of the limit of all of our imaginations, right? We're all going to hit that. So
yeah, it doesn't give you options.
Right. But even death is like, oh, well, if you'd like. I believe right now, let's see. I mean, some of the things just in terms of the way the book is set up, right? So we have these 7 chapters. And the one we were just talking about is, the first chapter is actually chapter 0. And it's this moment of dropping out. And the chapter you were just talking about is Ruined Castle, which is it's the second chapter, but it's called chapter 1. The next chapter, and I'm not sure exactly what to do with it, and maybe this is just me as a literature professor and I shouldn't give it too much attention, but the next chapter, chapter 2, Signal, is 47 pages long, right? All the other chapters are like right around 12, 15 pages long. And then all of a sudden we get this Signal chapter that is, right near a third of the entire book. And so I don't know if that's uneven or if there's a reason why that chapter really kind of explodes in terms of content. But it raised questions for me.
I see. I'm just noticing just before the Signal chapter, I finally understand what's going on there. Just after they go to sleep, we've got a couple of pages of somebody setting up in the museum. And I finally realized that's what it is. We can see this glass with reflections in it of like windows and doors. And the coloring is different. It's a lot more subtle on those pages. Who is doing that? I have no idea. Whose hands and feet are we seeing?
And we will, of course, right? And that's another place I have to say that the art was really nice. I enjoyed that art, and I enjoyed the reflections in the window. Like I thought that was pretty good. But yeah, that is the first moment where we see the museum, but even there, we're not yet seeing the wolf and the rabbit. We're not seeing the characters. So as you were pointing out, there's all these different kind of almost glimpses of foreshadowing, but not quite giving us enough to do much with it. So what it does to me as a reader is just confuses, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost meant to just introduce question. Like here, wonder, like that's kind of what's happening in those pages, because I can't do anything with it, right? And then at the end, I can then retrospectively or read it 2 or 3 times, or just all of a sudden start flipping back and go, wait a minute, I saw that before.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm just now kind of grasping this idea of the museum, and I'm not quite sure what it is, but well, maybe as we're going through it here, it'll kind of dawn on me. But
in the last chapter, I mean, do we want to? Do you want me to mention the last chapter? Or should we wait till we get to the last chapter?
Let's wait till we get there.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah.
But definitely we're getting these moments of like, it's almost like the reader is just asked to pay attention to these. This foreshadowing is almost like, okay, look for this again, because I mean, inevitably it's going to come up, right? The way art works is it has that kind of nice interpretive closure. So we expect this to come up again, and we're going to be kind of, as a reader, looking for it. And I think that at least in this moment, at the end of Ruined Castle, that's what it's doing, is like the reader's mind wants things to be a little bit coherent. Mm-hmm. And so we're impelled to sort of like ask these questions like, okay, let's see what comes of this.
Yeah. So in the Signal chapter, the signal is a mysterious signal that the station is picking up from outside, and they suit up and go out onto the planet's surface to investigate it. And what they eventually find is that there's another station on this planet, and the signal is coming from there. And they go inside, and there's like grass growing in there, and then they find this whole other room that's like it's outdoors on Earth with blue skies and birds flying around, and then they see this I guess before we get to the animals, there's this scene where they find like a film, some kind of video.
Oh.
And they see a guy who has a hat and a long coat, and he's got a campfire, and he has a gun, and he goes out like hunting and shoots at a wolf or a fox or something. And Heck and Birdie don't seem to quite get what it is. They're going like, weird. And then this is boring.
Right.
And then when he shoots, then Birdie says, "What the hell? Wait, stop." Yeah, and then that's when Heck knocks on her helmet. She says, "I said don't touch."
Right.
Then it's snowing, and they see a rabbit bouncing around. Yeah, and then they follow the rabbit into this other room where there's water coming down like a kind of round waterfall from the ceiling, and a bunch of like huge animals.
I should say, right, since this is like audio, if somebody had the comic book in front of them, like what's noticeable about the art is the shift, right? So if we keep seeing the rabbit, our mind keeps triggering with this lingering question of like, what does it mean? In the earlier image of the rabbit, it was, as you suggested, right? It was this kind of hollowed out hologram kind of thing. And at least here now, all of a sudden, the rabbit looks like, it's the same shape. The lines drawn are the same, but the artwork makes it look more like what we would expect a rabbit to look like.
Yeah, it doesn't have that weird look in its eye.
Correct. And then we get to, as you say, we get these kind of like massive animals.
Yeah, a moose and a bear and a wolf. And so for some reason that I didn't grasp, they say the whole room seems to be the signal source.
Right.
So I'm not sure what kind of signal this is. I mean, we don't see any like radio equipment or, transmitter or anything. But
yeah. I agree. I let that go. I mean, I believe we do see radio equipment in their space. Mm-hmm. We just don't, everything here looks like nature. We don't see any kind of technology here. And I just sort of went along for the ride at this point and said, okay,
yeah, whatever, go ahead, do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And Heck is looking at readings on his wrist, and he realizes that there's breathable oxygen there, and he takes off his helmet, and Birdie is like scandalized that he's taking such a risk. and slams his helmet back onto his head.
Right. Now, this is where, to me, we start getting a little, like, to me, I found this a little bit more interesting because we start getting interiority of the character, and we start seeing how much she's driven by this fear of danger and this kind of wanting things to be a certain way, which I think starts to help us understand, what is to come. I can't remember where it is, but that idea of curiosity, and I think Heck actually says, you've never been very curious. I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, he says a lot of things that I'm like, say more. Right. Because he talks about, like, don't you remember? But what doesn't she remember? Yeah, well, I guess that kind of ties into something that I did catch later, but he's wondering, like, should they tell Station about this? Is this something, like, would they get it? Like, seeing this Station might, like, sort of reprogram them to make them forget about it. Was that what you got out of it?
So a couple things, and I did find that, looking back, the curious reference is on page 69. So it's like 4 pages after the one you were just citing. And Heck says, hey, if nothing else, aren't you curious, on a separate panel? And it does feel like there's these references to this other station being beyond. So for instance, I believe the bird says, I can't quite reach you here. Like we can't quite reach here. Right. So this is a space that is beyond kind of their station's ability to control or manage what's happening. So it feels like an outside space. So now they're able to ask that question. Okay, do we report this or don't we report this? Which again is kind of creating this slippage in what should be a perfect world where everything is set up for them and they can kind of drop in and drop out and do this stuff. But there's all these moments where there's cracks in that AI. And this is not just a crack in the AI, but they've actually stepped outside beyond its reach and have to think for themselves in some sense, is the way I was reading that.
Yeah, okay. This is what I was looking for. Changeover protocols, which I took to mean some kind of reprogramming and making them forget that they had found this other station.
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Because Heck says, okay, so we tell Station and it's changeover protocols like you said. Minimum we get dropped in for months while this all gets sorted. Maybe years. Maybe ... And so Birdie's talking about, telling Station or reporting it back to TerraCorp, and Heck is like, do we even know TerraCorp still exists? Because they've been off of Earth for some time, and maybe it's gone bust. Who knows? Right.
Which again introduces that kind of that nice, that confusing uncertainty, kind of this external question of, like, hey, do we even know that we have a purpose here? Like, there's this kind of overriding question of kind of purpose and fulfillment and like what they're doing. And then there's starting to become these increasing references to not knowing. On page 86, we have no idea what it is. There's a lot of kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure. These quotes in there where we start really wondering how stable this reality is or what exactly is happening. And of course, it feeds into all of these references that have been left unanswered, like what's going to ultimately be the museum, but we don't even know that yet, right? So there's all these kind of pieces starting to fit together, but it's really inside of a pool of, I don't know. I'm not, even as readers, like, we just don't know.
Yeah. This podcast is part of the Deconstructing Comics network, where we're grateful to our supporters on Patreon. Patrons get exclusive extra content. Pledge $2 a month or more and get Batman 66 podcast Bat Bits and occasional trivia videos. Most recently, we presented trivia about 90125, the 1983 album from Yes. In the next few Bat Bits episodes, we'll discuss early drafts of the script for The Bookworm Turns. At $4 a month, you also get our new monthly show Silver Age Batman, where I'm moving through the book Batman in the 50s, issue by issue, with a rotating second chair of Paul, Emmett, Patrick, or Kumar. Follow our Patreon for free and you can hear the first 2 episodes of both Bat Bits and Silver Age Batman. Check it out at patreon.com/deconcomics, and thanks for your support.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarter Bin Podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarter Bin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarter Bin Podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarter Bin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
So, but yeah, it takes them a while to figure out what they're going to do. Well, they end up going back to the other station, and now they feel like the animals, which are, I guess, projections, they decide that the animals are projections, but they now look strange somehow. Though, yeah, the way that they're drawn now, they look a little bit more like stuffed animals. They don't look so real anymore, and they look kind of cuddly, these bears and wolves, and I don't see the moose anymore. But yeah, maybe they're starting to look more like they're in the museum.
Uh-huh. That's sort of interesting. I hadn't thought of the animals kind of evolving in that way, but I see your point.
And the animals are all kind of looking at them, which before the animals were just ignoring them.
Right. There's that one panel in particular where they're just like literally just facing the characters and looking at them instead of just kind of being in the background. And then this idea of background and foreground, which I think Heck at one point says, in this world, everything's background in here, Bertie. It must be it's probably around like page 80 or something. Everything here is background. And he kind of wants to foreground his own action stuff. But it seems like that dream space that they drop into and don't really fully drop out of. Like there's this kind of dimension lag where they seem now increasingly to always be dropped in or always be kind of interacting with station in some way.
Yeah.
So it's like everything's background here, which is a sort of like a depressing thought in some ways. Like the background.
And they realize that this other station apparently has no staff. There are no like pods for dropping in, no stasis. It's just kind of there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it seems like, when I first was reading it, it felt like that other station was abandoned, but maybe successful in its mission because they seem to be finding traces of life. But then there's moments where it kind of seems to disappear, or it's just a small piece of green inside of white. And it's like, okay, so was it successful or was it, is it starting to lay down the groundwork for life, or is it just part of image? When they walk into that room with the large animals, the largeness of the animals becomes also this sort of break in reality. Like, okay, so is this real? No, I don't think those animals are real. So now am I questioning everything there, including the grass, as not being real? Because these animals, unless they're like 3 stories high, are not real. And so it just seems like I do want more there. Like I'm not quite getting why are the animals so large? Like there's a couple too many questions in my mind as a reader that I would like something that I can kind of hold on to or anchor my attention on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we never really arrive at certainty about things. We get ideas of what's possible, what we might be seeing, but I don't know that any questions that are introduced are really answered.
Right. I think if you're looking for certainty, this is not this is not the space to jump into. Again, like I fairly confident the artist doesn't want anything to do with certainty, right? It's more about questions like
maybe just like getting us to think about things rather than like, here's what's happening.
Which I don't mind terribly. Like, I almost felt like at one point I was reading the comic and it almost felt like this irony of agency, right? So if agency is this ability to act, to sort of to do what I want to do with intention, then presumably this is a space of incredible agency, because literally the station is saying, well, it is the way you want it to be, right? So it's almost like this green light. I mean, do whatever you want. And there's times where she goes through the bars like a ghost and her brother is like, oh my gosh, we can do that. And it feels like this massive sense of agency where she can just think it, will it, and do it. But clearly she's not thoroughly happy. She's not feeling fulfilled. So it's almost like this irony of agency in the sense that, you know, in a space where she can do whatever she wants, it almost feels as if she can't really do what she wants to do. Like there's something driving there. And it's almost like if I'm dating someone and, my partner is one of these people that just always says, well, whatever you want. Yes. Okay. Whatever you want. Yeah, sure. Whatever you want. And it's like, at some point it's like, good God, push back, tell me no, like say you want a different restaurant or something like that. And so to me, that's the irony of agency, is that like, okay, great, I have all this agency, but like,
and the AI like really lays on the friendly chatter thick, like sure, no problem, whatever you want. It gets a little tiring at times, I think, even to the characters, let alone to us. Well, and there's the one point earlier on where the AI keeps saying ship shape, and finally she just asks it to stop using that term
for the day. Like, no more for the day, no more. And there's a couple moments where, that was too much, wasn't it? Like they sort of, they're trying to act human, but they can't quite pull it off. And we get those cracks again. I mean, I have to say, they are helpful for the reader, right? For the reasons that you described. If we don't have those moments, this would be almost impossible to, like, without those moments of slippage, we wouldn't be able to identify what's in the reality and what isn't in the reality, or kind of like how do we even process this stuff. So even though like there are times where it feels a little clunky in how direct we get it, it also feels like terribly necessary, because without it we would have no signposts for like, oh, wait a minute, what's happening here.
Yeah, of course, everything going perfectly all the time doesn't make for a good story, any story. But yeah, we haven't mentioned that the like projections and things that they see while they're awake, they call algos, short for algorithms. And on page 105, where Heck keeps implying something without spelling it out, Birdie says the algos aren't meant to be real. They're meant to make us feel good, happy. And Heck says, that's not, do you remember any of it? Nope, nothing. And she says, I never know what you want me to say. And we're like, tell us what's going on. But yeah, apparently we see that she doesn't remember why she's there. Right. And Heck seems to know more about it, or remember how they ended up there. And it's all kind of lost for her.
Right. Except that, so there's, I don't know, there's two tracks to the memory, right? So she doesn't remember the actual objects that Heck's describing, but she seems to at least remember enough to realize that Heck knows something. Like she has some residue of memory that is drawing her to grasping that Heck has a little more, almost apparently like a little more awareness than she does, because she seems caught by what he says.
Right. So then after a while, he just kind of gets so frustrated with the conversation that he just kind of walks off. And
Well, can I just say, like, to the point about kind of memory, right? It's also about what they're committed to, because Heck seems committed to, like, going out and checking out this other station. He's committed to asking all these questions. And on page 101, which is the end of the previous chapter, we have one of those moments you and I were talking about where, like, the little rabbit is trying to make her feel better. And then she says, "Life for TerraCorp and TerraCorp for life," right? Which is the anthem of the company. And you see the hands kind of like cringing, like, "Oh my God." And the rabbit's kind of quivering and says, "Oh, sorry about that. My memory got a little overloaded there." And so, like, it's almost as if she's having this struggle, not just with memory, but with refusing to remember, which is a little bit different, right? So, like, the absence of the memory is to not know, but to refuse to remember is like almost a willfulness to let something go. And she's drawn, unlike Heck, to the corporation's anthem. But then there's these moments where it's too much as well. Like, okay, I really buy into the corporation's language, but it's too much.
Yeah, well, she throws up in the last panel of that chapter.
Yeah, exactly. It just becomes too much. So then we get this dropping in chapter that we were entering that I cut you off on. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, or he says, "Do you remember any of it? Nothing." Yeah, this is the part I was quoting before. "I never know what you want me to say. Why'd you even come in here?" They're in this part of the station where there's like moss growing that helps make oxygen for the station, I think.
Well, but I mean, aren't they now, like, to me this was almost like a leisure space or something, because the chapter title is Drop In, right? Isn't this the drop in chapter? So I assumed that they were dropped in, and so nothing quite looked.
They asked the AI, she says, "Show us the new background." And so now they see all these like cartoony flowers and mushrooms and stuff in amongst the moss.
Right, which is very differently drawn than when they were in that other station and things looked a little more realistic. Like you said, they're very cartoony. The flower, they have faces on them, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, yeah, she really doesn't remember whatever it is. Heck says, "All this time we haven't been reminding each other. We can't go back, can we?" And she says, "Of course we can't." And then there's a pause. She says, "Sorry." He says, "No, I'm sorry, Birdie. I'll stop all this." And so then he's just kind of withdrawn. And here's where they try to do the medieval fantasy thing again. And the skeleton breaks character. And Heck wanders off like into some woods, and then I don't know, it gets a lot more kind of surreal, like just like space everywhere, but nobody's wearing a spacesuit, so this all seems to be some kind of illusion too. And then she sees Heck, and he just kind of turns into a flock of birds and flies away.
Right.
And he says, "You'll see. You'll just try to see, okay?"
Right. To me, that's the first moment where I actually start to feel like I can grapple with what's going on here, and because all of a sudden now Heck is a part of the background.
Yeah.
And turns into these birds and breaks up and is it seems like part of the dropped in background.
Right. So then she seems to be alone on the station after that. Well, and we see like that glassy-eyed rabbit again.
Right.
And the AI bear tries to calm her down.
Yeah, go back to sleep. Everything is fine, right? There's all these moments of you're happy, you're fine. When it's connected to TerraCorp. There's all these little references to everything's fine. You're okay. try to calm down. And then, in fact, I can't remember where it is, but the AI actually tries to calm her down, which is kind of feels ironic since it feels like the AI is driving her nuts, and then is like, okay, breathe.
Right. Yeah, that's like page 114, 115, the end of that chapter. And yeah, we're getting into more spoilery territory here, so just a warning to listeners. And we see her at the beginning of chapter 6, Payload, with a key. And I guess what's mentioned later, this key sort of is to start the changeover process. So she's, I guess, like willing to kind of hit the reset button.
Yeah, and then this, again, with some of your opening comments, I feel like I either wanted a little more or a little less. Like I couldn't quite figure out exactly what was happening there. And so I either like make it more poetically efficient and less, or just give me what we're doing, like what's happening in this exchange exactly.
And we see her just kind of doing her work. We didn't mention before, there are these things that look like giant toasters that are some kind of farming, like AI farmers.
Right.
And they talk to her, and they seem to have like eyes. They look kind
smile
of
at one point, I believe, and they're kind of interacting with her, in order to terraform.
Yeah,
I mean that's how I took that.
Yeah, and the AI is now wondering if she trusts it or not.
Right.
After all this time to get together, could you trust me, Birdie? So I thought that was kind of interesting that the AI is kind of getting, like, feeling kind of abandoned almost, or distrusted, feeling less certain of its place, as if it were human.
Right. And to me now, that's kind of the next step in this process, right? So if we see Heck dissipate, and turn into birds and kind of fly away, now the AI is actually concerned about its own place in Birdie's life. Like, how is this relationship working? Yeah.
And she asks the AI to, like, I guess, like, all of the scenery has been some kind of projections. And she asks the AI to turn off the projections for a moment. And it's all just this white nothingness.
Right.
And she says, oh, God, it's awful here. And
Right.
Heck had been trying to tell her this before, that they were actually in, like, nothingness. But she didn't want to listen to it before.
Yeah. What page are you looking at right now?
121.
Okay. Right.
And then it just kind of, it goes back to this more dreamy, cartoony landscape with the smiling flowers and stuff, and kind of space, and it's just this kind of unreal landscape. And there's a giant AI fox and also a squirrel. And Birdie had been talking before about how the other station had blue sky, but their station just had rain all the time. Right. And the AI was telling her, like, we haven't been able to get to having blue sky here yet. Like, there was some sort of technical issue that they couldn't do blue sky. Right. So now they can, but she's, like, kind of over it.
I do think, right, so the transitions are significant here. You just had that part, oh my God, it's awful here. Or oh God, it's awful here. And then transitions to those animated, like overly animated characters that you were describing. And like we start to really get this sense that it's a cover-up, that the not a cover-up, but that AI is attempting to impose a happiness that isn't actually there, because it's right at the moment when she says, oh my God, this is awful, that, all of a sudden now we're back in the, we have a maze it's a full page, I believe it's a full page panel, and it's got a maze, it's got all these animals, it's got the rabbit in the center, and then those toaster farmers boxes,
Yeah.
that she's sitting on. And so it almost feels more imposed because it's at that moment, that kind of abrupt shift from, oh God, this is awful, to that really feels strong, feels like it's imposed. And then the wolf is asking about that ruined castle. And some of the strands of the narrative start to braid together a bit here, I think. We're starting to, like, as a reader, I feel more informed here. Though, whenever Death walked in, I wasn't sure exactly what to do with Death. I don't know. Did you figure out how to interpret Death's participation? What did you do with that?
I don't know. I think I treated it as comedy relief. Yeah, because this is where Death says, "Well, sure, if that's what you want."
Right.
And so this tree has appeared that the AI thinks is nothing, but she pulls a book out of it, and yeah, Death talks to her. Trespasser, you've tried Trespasser? Don't you wish to fight anymore? And she just wants to look at this book, even though all the pages are blank.
Right. Which for me, it's partly confusing, but also fits in, like, I think I've often seen where the blank page is something that you can write your own way, right? The blank page is something that, the poet always deals with the blank page before she writes the poem.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the one hand, the blank page has this potential for like an opportunity to do something with it, but she's really not doing anything with it, right? I'm just going to turn the pages for a while anyway, and they're blank. Mm-hmm. And so it's this weird feeling of, oftentimes if I see something like a blank page, it feels like an opportunity to write your own script. But here, all she's doing is looking at the blank pages.
So, yeah, on 126, she's talking with the AI animals, and she's like got the door of the station open, looking out into the planet's surface, talking about, we found another station over there. The AI says, yes, I know. Shall we go inside? Have a haircut, maybe? Get some sleep? She says, I turned the key, the changeover. We saw that key before. AI says, yes. She says, nothing's happening. Did you even tell TerraCorp? Are you going to? AI says, is that what you want? So, yeah, I mean, as we heard before, things are malfunctioning. So apparently even like the changeover doesn't work anymore.
Right. And she says, I thought it felt so important, but I keep forgetting what I'm doing here. And it goes back to that idea of kind of her strained relationship with memory, with reality, but that it felt really important. And now all of a sudden, like she turned the key for the changeover, and the AI, the station, is saying, well, do you want me to talk to them? It's like, well, I thought this thing was really significant. I thought that would have happened. Like, it's almost the suggestion that, well, I thought that would have happened automatically if this is as significant as I was led to believe.
Yeah, there's too much that's left up to her.
Yeah.
And she says it's almost like the other station is real and this is the dead one.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to do with that, but yeah, something's terribly wrong here. If she's alive at the dead station, then yeah, it's a puzzle, a maze. Everything seems to be waiting. So she goes out, and now the AI can follow her. May I come with you? Can you? I think so now.
Right.
So they go out, and then now we see the ghostly fox chasing the ghostly rabbit, as they're, I guess, walking towards the other station.
And these are moments where I really, I would like to talk to the artist. Because so there's that panel where you say it's almost like the other station is real and this one is the dead one, which makes some sense with the earlier references to like going beyond station's reach, right? When they went on the first trip out to that other station, they were beyond the reach of their station. And they were able to talk and ask questions that presumably they could not in their own station. And in that sense, like, I started to, oh, okay, so it's more real. It's where they can ask these questions of themselves that, inside their station just become these funky animated spaces. But then when she's going back, as you pointed out, the station animal character says, well, do you want me to go with you? I think I can now. And I don't know what the shift was there, because if that other station is still the real station, isn't it beyond the reach of her station? And if it's no longer beyond the reach of her station, what accounts for that change? Like, that's where I kind of like, what's the now? Like, what just happened?
Mm-hmm. And so we talked before about the payloads, the asteroids and comets, and there's been this asteroid that's coming, and now it's in the sky, but it's not moving.
Right.
And it's not moving, is it? And the AI says, do you want it to? Right. So, like, everything is up to her.
This is where, for me now, it started to, like, I don't know, maybe I was over interpreting it or something. But it definitely started to feel like, again, spoiler alerts, but everything being up to her means everything is kind of, she's now functioning in this space that's being created for her. Mm-hmm. And she's just doing kind of some mechanical behaviors, but everything that we've been reading up to this point, as whether it's real or fantasy, they're all the same. Like, they're all inside of this fantasy. What's the word that TerraCorp uses? That dream space.
This dream space. Yeah, she's dropped in.
Like, there's almost no dropping out, is what I'm feeling now. That you're dropped in and resting, or you're dropped in and, functioning in some way for the station, but you're really always dropped in.
Mm-hmm. And eventually she and the AI fox arrive at the museum, and she takes off her spacesuit, and it says Museum Hall asterisk recorded. And she mentions Heck, like, is Heck there? Heck? I want to see. And then there's this panel that I'm still trying to figure out. It looks like kind of a comet with a smiley face that's heading towards the top of the Washington Monument. I'm not sure.
I have to say, what I thought of? Do you ever watch Miyazaki movies? Have you ever seen Howl's Moving Castle?
I haven't seen that one. I've seen some of the others, but...
in the English dub version, Billy Crystal plays this character, Calcifer, which is this talking flame. And it actually looks a lot like... if you look in the background of one of the panels early in this book, it absolutely looks like Calcifer. And so when I got to this panel, I couldn't get Calcifer from Howl's Moving Castle out of my head. And it doesn't help you make any sense of this panel. I agree with you. And so I was kind of like, okay, now my mind is just playing with itself, because I didn't have enough to hold on to and to understand why, it's coming crashing down, but it's not just crashing down and the smile on its face, but it's crashing down. Is that the tip of the station that it's coming down on? Like, what's that point?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Perhaps that's what it is.
And so I sort of couldn't grab that part. Like, I just couldn't make sense of it. And then the next page is a blank black page. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we're at the very end, we're going to get another blank page.
Chapter 7, Museum Hall.
Right. This black blank page is the first time we don't get that kind of like advertisement blurb for TerraCorp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, upon reading multiple times and also reading the reviews, I decided that what's going on here is the past. Kind of. Although we see Heck, but he's got initially he's got kind of an AI fox face.
Right.
And the two of them are in a grassy area, apparently on Earth. maybe.
Yeah. So I suppose we should make a distinction, though, right? In terms of the past and memory of the past. We're
Hmm.
inside the
Hmm.
memory.
Hmm.
And this is how I think she is putting the different strands of the narrative together for herself.
Hmm.
That's my sense of it. And it's kind of inside of this memory scape that she's starting to piece things together.
Yeah, because
And
she's saying, "Where are we? Are you?" But yeah, he's following apparently things that he actually said in the past. You're really going?
right. Now it feels like a memory of Heck saying, don't go for the 100th, and he's about to say time. Nothing is calling you. Don't be so. You're going to
Yeah.
die out there,
And
right? And so
they
now,
both look younger too, and they're wearing like clothes are different. They look like they might be teenagers.
yeah, like school clothes is what I was going to say, or something. Like
Yeah,
sweater
private
vests and
school.
stuff. Yeah. Um, and then I'm sorry, I'm just so mad at you, right? So there's this. Heck is actually trying to convince her not to go, presumably to the station that she's at for most of the book.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yeah, he's angry at her, but he says, "Listen, I'll always look up and say hi."
Right.
And then now we see her like in her spacesuit again without the helmet, like she's half asleep, saying, "That's nice." And then she says, "Ouch." I'm not sure what was causing the pain there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what causes. Is it the white drops that are drop in her eye, something like that?
Maybe.
Uh, it does seem to me like there's these moments where sense perception is another break in AI. There's moments where it's sound. Here, it's kind of touch. There's the tapping on the head, and there's these different moments where perceiving something intruding
Hmm.
is sparking an awareness, or is like a slippage or a break in this AI dreamscape stuff. And she's like, "That's nice." Ouch. What? And then she's kind of rubbing her eye, and then in that next page, we see the panel of the animals, which now we start making sense of, right? So we
They're
see this,
yeah, in a museum. They're
right,
stuffed animals. I mean,
right, and it's very clear when you
taxidermy.
see the birds, like the birds are
Yeah.
tied to strings, right? So
Hmm.
it's clearly, they're stuffed or whatever, and they're in a museum.
Yeah, and she thinks she's talking to Heck, but now nobody's. Initially, someone was saying, "Look, I'm trying to show you something." And stop it, Birdie. Stop looking away. And she realizes she's wandering around in there alone.
Right.
And Station is a haunted house, isn't it? So maybe that's the connection to the death, the skeleton.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Station is a haunted house, and she says, and that makes me the. And then we see more of a almost black and white page of these museum stuffed animals and somebody with a paintbrush, and it's clearly a museum.
Right. And they seem to be setting up the diorama.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they're putting the diorama together.
Yeah, of the fox chasing the rabbit.
Of the fox chasing the rabbit. And so it's, in that earlier dialogue you were referencing about, hey, look, I'm trying to show you something. That's all in one page, right? The top of the page is this debate, these word bubbles that have no attribution. They're not connected. There's no arrow kind of connecting them to this or that character. And then she says, with attribution, this is to, I don't like this. And then stop it, Birdie is kind of just a floating word bubble until the bottom half of that same page when she's in total whiteness and there's no border to the panel.
Yeah.
And she says, I'm alone. So then my grasp of that is that all of this is her talking to herself, or her kind of like there's these parts of her in debate with herself.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm wondering now if the whole station on another planet thing is just a metaphor, and it's more about like how you get along with the world, and that you're ultimately alone, and like, do you cut yourself off from everything, or do you engage?
Right.
And life gives you these choices. Whatever you want to do, do you take the choices or not?
So I think it's a metaphor for us, the readers. I don't know to what degree it's a metaphor for her, the character. Like, that's part, to me, that's one of the things that I struggle with these sorts of stories. When you're in some kind of dreamscape, alternate, like, it's hard to know. So then, was the whole story just a metaphor? Like,
Yeah.
or were there moments that were real? Is she actually serving some purpose for this corporation, which I'm assuming is the case, that she's kind of a little bit like the Matrix or something, but instead of being a battery, she's kind of like the mechanic for this terraforming. But that requires her to sort of check out, and to kind of, in order to be happy, which she doesn't seem terribly happy, but this kind of this very thin sense of happiness, she has to buy into TerraCorp's anthem, and just kind of keep repeating it over and over again so that she can be a part of this. But it ends up being unfulfilling. And then there's those lines, like you said, station is a haunted house, isn't it? And that makes me I don't feel like I have enough information to know the end of that sentence. And, I understand lack of certainty, but I feel like I could have used at least something.
I suppose that the logical end of that sentence would be ghost. Makes me the ghost if it's haunted.
Yeah, station is a haunted house, isn't it? And that makes me or are you the visitor of the haunted house who's enjoying it? Or the next page, they're putting the diorama together. Are you the one that created the haunted house so that other people can visit and enjoy the scare? Like,
yeah, several interpretations, I guess. So then we get 4 pages of Heck, apparently on Earth. And he's like getting up early in the morning and kissing, I don't know, looks too small to be a wife. Maybe it's a child.
Yeah, that's what I took.
And he goes outside with his dog. It's winter. He puts his coat on. And then he's looking up at the sky, like just as she kind of remembered him saying that he would look up and say hi.
Right.
So he doesn't actually say hi here, but yeah, that's the idea.
Right. We'll assume that it's a quiet hello. This is also, like, again, I don't know if it's a worthwhile comment, but the idea of sense perception and kind of what's real and the dreamscape. If I remember correctly, this when we see Heck petting the dog or scratching under the neck of the dog, I don't remember any other physical contact between them and the animals. I mean, when they're positioning the diorama animals that are clearly stuffed or fake, maybe that. But this is the first moment where there's this actual physical contact, and there's actual sensory contact, which to me is that sign. Oh, this is like, now we're in the real.
Right. So then we're back at the station, and now that changeover is being initiated. It says shift change script initiated, analyzing station systems, processing, and we see those farmer toasters with their eyes are closed, and some space helmets, and we see that nature scene in the other station, with a very realistic looking deer standing in the water.
Right.
And Birdie in her spacesuit without the helmet, asleep or in stasis, I guess, waking up. And then a panel with a page with no artwork, just words. The computer is processing, and we get the dialogue, "Hi, Birdie, you look like shit," which we got at the beginning. So it's looping back to the beginning. And so apparently, that implies that the whole thing was not real. It was something that she was seeing in stasis, I guess, and now it's just looping it back to that.
Yeah.
And Heck had said, like, if we didn't mention it, but yeah, he had said at one point, it feels like we've done these things before. We keep doing it over again.
That's right. And this is where, like, I think you made the point earlier that there seems to be a couple tiers to the second shift, right? And at first meaning like the first 150 pages of the book, the second shift just feels like they're taking Porter's place in the workforce. But now all of a sudden, second shift seems to break apart in a couple ways, and one of them is this changeover that might be going back to the start, or this kind of, the changeover seems to be a shift. There also seems to be a clear shift inside the character. Like, I think when I was reading the book at first, for this kind of a book, I'm often looking for change in the character. And I wasn't really feeling any change in the character, and it was a little bit frustrating to me. I was like, okay, let's see where this happens. If change does happen to this character, it's in these last couple pages. I mean, her body posture, she looks miserable. The dialogue says she looks like shit. And then we get this, her hand is wavering, and you see the lines around it to indicate wavering, but it's also consistent with one of the very early panels when she drops out, and it says that dropping out can be unpleasant. And she's looking at Heck, and Heck has those lines as if her vision is kind of a vibrating sort of, wavering vision. And then we get, these blank pages that you described, and now we get that final, that blank white page.
So apparently this dropping out is something she's experiencing while still dropped in.
Right. It's like a loop, because now we have a blank page, and she was looking at that book by the tree that was a book of blank white pages. And here she's now, we as a reader and everything is we're looking at this blank white page.
Yeah. And after that page, there's one completely white page with nothing on it at all.
Right.
Before the acknowledgement. So, yeah, I mean, the more I go over it, the more it kind of starts to make sense, but I think I need to read it about 10 more times.
I sort of, I enjoyed it, but I feel like if I had a couple comments kind of about the art, not the visual art, but the artistic kind of way the book was put together, I do almost feel like I would like it either shorter or longer. For this reason, oftentimes when you're writing, you say, don't tell me, show me. And a lot of times if I'm teaching writing to students or whatever, I say, don't tell me, show me. Don't just tell me that something's there. Give me the evidence, draw out the image, give me the setting, etc. And here there's moments where I feel like the flip happens, right? Whether it's the comment I previously referenced about kind of curiosity. Don't name it. Let me as the reader come to it. Let me kind of like do the character in such a way that I can feel that. Show it to me. Don't tell it to me. And so in that sense, I'm almost asking the artist to give me more. There's these moments that you and I both were kind of like, I don't know how that sentence ends. Like, I don't have enough information to even make minimal sense of it. Or go in the opposite direction. And instead of making it 160 pages, make it 90 pages. And just have it be this incredibly efficient, difficult to grasp sort of dreamscape that we just recognize as, oh, okay, we're in alternate reality time. But I was feeling this kind of like.
So would you say that making it this length makes it feel like there's going to be a little more something to it that's not there?
A little bit. I feel like, in fairness, because I always think that this kind of creative work is so difficult. And when you're trying to create not just an alternate world, but you're trying to create an alternate world in which the characters doubt themselves, and we as readers are doubting the characters. It's just all of those layers of lack of uncertainty are incredibly challenging to mark the different moments of reality. And so I give a lot of credit for the kind of the effort. But it does feel like it's a first graphic novel. Her previous work, I believe, was short stories. And
Yeah, I think the Safer Places had several stories in it. Yeah.
yeah, it's a different form, right? And so short stories, you kind of can drop into something without beginning and end, and just kind of have a scene or a
Mm-hmm.
moment, or
Mm-hmm.
and there's not the expectation that you know the characters fully. But when you get a novel length, story, you're just expecting to have a bit more of coherence, like a bit more of having it flushed out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's challenging. And so I sort of, give credit for a first time graphic novel at this length,
Mm-hmm.
with all of these different layers of reality and understanding, and the sense of doubting reality is a really difficult thing to do. So I would give credit for that effort, but there are moments where I kind of wanted a little bit more out of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah, this review is not quite as glowing as some of the ones I read, but that's fine. Because
We can do another.
it's a difficult book to evaluate, I think, if you're honest.
I do like it fits inside of a certain sort of storyline. I think like the Abre los Ojos, the Vanilla Skies in the English version.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple, even The Matrix, but for very different purposes, has this sense of being in reality or outside of reality, and really questioning kind of that reality that you're in. And to me, this fits nicely inside of that kind of a tradition, but it doesn't move that tradition. And I think that's part of what I would have wanted out of it. Like, now we've seen a couple times where you have a story, and then at the end you're like, oh my God, this is what happened. So now the challenge is to take that and do something more with it. And I don't feel like it did.
Mm-hmm. Second Shift by Kit Anderson is published by Avery Hill. Follow us on Blue Sky at Decon Comics. On Facebook, we have both a page and a group. Those are linked from deconstructingcomics.com, as is our YouTube channel, where our episodes are posted every week as videos of a single image. You can comment on our episodes on YouTube or on our site, or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com, or talk to us. Click the Leave a Voicemail link on the left sidebar of our site. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. The music backing the promotion of our Patreon is Change by Jazar. The release of Fantastic Four First Steps is fast approaching, and we've been counting down to it by reviewing previous FF movies. Next week we begin another crossover with the Comic Book Movie Oblivion podcast to review the last non-MCU FF movie, 2015's Fantastic Four. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.